The key content of today is to identify, discuss and define the current challenges in professional discussions about active housing. What do you identify as the main challenges under this umbrella called active housing that we face today?
Well, active housing, as I understand it, is having houses that are actually able to produce their own energy or their own energy needs, and it doesn't cost anything in terms of how comfortable the house is to live in. So I think conservation of energy is one of the most important things we have to look at, not just in existing buildings or in new buildings, but in existing buildings. And when I say conservation of energy, it's not just insulation and not overheating the buildings, but also maybe retrieving the heat that's in the ventilation that you're putting out of the building. But it's also a question of being able to produce own electricity, and that makes electricity or power be decentralized if it's on an individual house. And it'll be a major challenge to find a way to be able to use this energy effectively.
What do you believe are the best answers to these challenges and why?
The best answers, there are no best answers, but how do we get there? I mean, how do we get the infrastructure in order to be able to do this conservation or to be able to use the individual energy? And that actually, I think, requires input from other partners than simply people who are actively involved in the housing industry itself. And we need, for example, to make it economically feasible, to have economic incentives to save energy. And we need to have instruments to help us save energy, smart systems in the house that can say, oh, well, you know, there's no one in that room to use that light. Let's turn it off for them instead of making you and me feel guilty about the fact that we haven't turned off lights. And it also requires, if we're going to talk about decentralized energy producing units on different houses, solar energy or whatever, it's incentives for putting it in, and it's also a way of making it work together with the energy grid that we already have or the energy grid that we may have in the future.
The energy challenge concerns the fact that buildings consume approximately 40% of all produced energy. To address climate change and reduce the global energy consumption, it is crucial to consider using renewable energy sources as part of the solution, also in terms of securing energy supply. How do you foresee that we best can confront the energy challenge in buildings in the future?
Renewable energy supplies is not part of the solution, they are the solution. We have to be using renewable energies in the middle part of this century, not just for climate, but simply because we're going to run out of the fossil fuels that we're using today. So this, I think, is the major challenge, is not to be thinking in terms of, well, I need to use more and more renewable energy. This house uses 20% renewable energy. That's not going to help us if we don't have the 80%, the energy that should fill up the other 80%. So that, I think, is the major challenge in terms of making active housing or energy conservation in housing, to move it entirely over to renewable energy.
The living factor challenge concerns the fact that we spend 90% of our time indoors, but less than 30% of the building mass contributes to or provides a healthy indoor climate. As humans, we need fresh air and daylight when we are indoors. It has a positive effect on our health and well-being, as well as on our ability to learn. How do you foresee that we can confront the living factor challenge in buildings in the future?
We have to confront the living factor challenge, and I think actually we do have today. I think the housing industry is one of the most interesting in the whole energy business, because we do actually have the mechanisms today to be able to have a comfortable house which is energy it's certainly very, very low consumption. In some cases, people even say producing energy, so a positive energy producer, and without losing the comfort that you need, the light that you need, the windows that you need, and so on. We see lots of examples of these coming. So I think that's the really interesting thing about the housing industry. We have the technology. What we don't have is the incentives to make people use the technology that's available. And so I think we need economic incentives, and we need regulatory incentives to make this be the choice that people would naturally take. I mean, many other places we're missing the technology. Here we actually have the technology.
What is active housing in your definition, and how do you believe it is relevant to the work that you and your organization carries out?
Well, active housing, as I started with by saying, active housing is houses that aren't just passive boxes that you live in, but they are houses or apartments or whatever that are active in the sense that they contribute to producing the energy that is used in the house. And obviously, I mean, I'm taking the sort of living quality for granted, because we're not willing to give up our living quality, and we need that quality. So an active house is the one that can contribute to the energy required to sustain that quality that we need. And in terms of how it contributes to the climate policy in Denmark, I'm chairman for the Climate Commission in Denmark on climate policy. Obviously, we all live in houses, and buildings, not just houses, but buildings are a major energy consumer in this country, and thus, at the moment, a major supply of CO2 to the atmosphere, and we simply have to get away from that situation. So it's absolutely critical. That and transport are the two most critical issues, I think, that are facing the Climate Change Commission.